I have worked worse postings than the Lane. I want that on the record before I say anything unkind about the Aling, because most of what follows is going to sound unkind, and I would rather it sound fair. They kept the place at 26 degrees. Every corridor, every gallery, every private chamber on the whole vast wheel of the habitat held at 26 degrees, day in and day out, for what I was told was somewhere past 900 years. Not 25, not 27, 26, measured to a decimal I never bothered to learn, everywhere, always, forever. When I first came aboard, I thought it was pleasant. By my second month, I had stopped noticing it, the way you stop noticing a hum. By my second year, I had come to understand that it was not a comfort to them. It was a creed. I was the station's contract medic. There were 2 of us humans aboard a habitat that held 9,000 Aling, me, and a maintenance tech named Odell who worked the underdecks and whom I saw perhaps once a week. The rest of the human presence was a thin trickle of freighter crews who docked, unloaded, and left as fast as they could, because nobody who could avoid it lingered on an Aling pleasure crown. It was too soft. It was too warm. It was too pleased with itself. And the pay was good precisely, because the Aling could not stand to keep us around any longer than they had to. They found us pitiable. I want to be clear that it was not hatred. Hatred would have been easier to work alongside. It was pity, the deep and genuine and entirely comfortable pity of a people who had decided, a long time ago, that they had solved the problem of existing, and that everyone who had not solved it the same way was to be gently, endlessly, condescendingly mourned. Lord Steward Varen Alain Sethanar was the one who mourned me most. He was old even for them, which is saying something, because the Alain are long-lived in the way of things that have removed every reason to hurry. Tall, in the way a candle is tall, a long pale column of a body that tapered upward to a narrow head, skinned the faint translucent gold of good wax, so that in bright light you could half see the slow architecture moving beneath it. Fronds where I would have wanted hands. A voice like water poured slowly from one warm vessel into another. He wore robes that had been grown rather than woven, layered gauze that responded to the ambient temperature, though the ambient temperature never changed. So I never once saw the robes do anything but hang there being beautiful and useless. He liked to visit the infirmary. Not because he was ever ill, the Aling were not particularly, and when they were, their own physicians handled it, but because I was there and I was a curiosity, and he had reached the age where curiosities were most of what he had left. Medic Halloran, he would say, folding down onto the visitor's bench with the unhurried grace of a species that had never once had to move quickly. You are cold today. I'm the same temperature I always am, Lord Steward. Yes, a slow, sorrowful ripple down the fronds which I had learned to read as sympathy. That is what I mean. That was the joke, if you could call it a joke, that ran under every conversation I ever had with him. To an Aling, a human ran cool. Our skin sat a few degrees below theirs. Our extremities, our fingers, and the tips of our ears could sit a good deal below that, and we would not even remark on it. To Varen, this was a kind of ongoing tragedy. He genuinely believed I was suffering. He believed that all humans were suffering, all the time, everywhere, in a low background hum of discomfort we had simply never been civilized enough to notice, and that the great gift the Aling could offer the galaxy, the thing that made them, in their own estimation, the finest people it had produced, was that they had learned to notice, and then learned to make the noticing stop. You evolved in weather, he told me once, and he said the word the way I might say gangrene. On a surface, under an open sky, with no one regulating anything, the temperature simply did what it wished, rose, fell. Some seasons your ancestors nearly froze, some seasons they nearly cooked, and they endured it because they had no choice, because no one had yet arrived to tell them it did not have to be so. His fronds drew inward, a gesture of profound distress on my behalf. It is a wonder to me that your kind produced anything at all. All that magnificent struggle, spent simply on staying alive against a climate. Imagine what you might have become if you had been comfortable. We might have become you, I said. He took it as a compliment. I did not entirely mean it as one, but the beauty of the awling was that you could be as dry as you liked, and it slid right off them, because it never once occurred to them that a human might be laughing. I should describe the hearthworks, because it matters later. The hearthworks was the climate core of the station, and the awling treated it roughly the way a very old and very devout family treats the family shrine, with a reverence so total that it had curdled into a refusal to think about it at all. It sat at the hub of the wheel, a great warm cathedral of a chamber, and it did one thing supremely well. It held the whole station at 26 degrees. It drew its warmth from the fusion loop, trimmed it, spread it, balanced it across 9,000 chambers, and it had done this without a single meaningful failure for 9 centuries. That record was the problem, though it took a catastrophe to teach me why. Because the hearthworks had never failed, nothing aboard the Aurelane was built to cope with it failing. The repair drones were tuned for the narrow band of tasks a perfect climate produces: a stuck vent, a fouled diffuser, a lighting panel. The doors, the lifts, the medical suite, the fabrication galleries, every automated system on the wheel had been designed, refined, and re-refined across 900 years toward one single unspoken assumption, so deep that no one had ever written it down, that it would always be 26 degrees. The whole magnificent machine of the station was a machine for being comfortable, built by a people who had forgotten, if they had ever known, that comfort is a thing you have to keep winning, and that a system which has only ever won does not know how to fight. And the awling themselves were the same. Below about 10 degrees an awling goes torpid slow, then slower, then still. Below freezing an awling dies, quietly and without much drama, the long pale body simply ceasing, the way a candle gutters. They had known this once, the way you know a fact from a schoolroom, and then they had built a world in which it could never come up, and then they had spent 900 years forgetting it was true. I knew it was true because I was the medic and I read the species files, the way you read the fine print on a thing before you sign your name under it. I knew the numbers. I filed them somewhere in the back of my head under things that will never happen, which is where all of us keep the things that then happen. It began on an ordinary shift. I was in the infirmary, doing the small, dull work that made up most of my days, logging a freighter pilot's inoculations. Mostly, a human woman named Sephi who had docked that morning and who was sitting on my table complaining about awling coffee, which is not coffee and should not be called coffee, on which point she and I were in complete agreement. Varen was there too, in his usual spot on the visitor's bench, mourning us both in a companionable sort of way. "You both run so cool," he observed, watching Sephi rub her hands together out of habit. "And now there are 2 of you. The infirmary is practically a tundra." "It's 26 degrees in here, Lord Steward," I said, "same as everywhere." "Yes, and yet," he rippled, pleased with himself. "Presence medic Halloran, you bring your own weather with you. A human is a small parcel of the old bad sky walking around indoors." That was when the light changed. It is a small thing to describe, and it was a small thing to see. The ambient glow of the infirmary, which came from the walls themselves and was tuned to the same eternal warm gold as everything else, flickered not off, just down, a dimming and a recovery, a single slow blink. And a moment after it, so faint I would not have caught it if I had not spent 2 years in a room that never changed. The air moved. A breath of it. Cooler. Sephi felt it before I said anything. Freighter crews develop an animal sense for a station telling them something is wrong. She stopped rubbing her hands and went still. "Was that the environmentals?" she said. "Probably a diffuser cycling," I said, because that is what it always was. In 2 years the air had never once done anything I had not been able to explain away. And I explained this one away too, out loud calmly, while some older and less comfortable part of me was already sitting up and paying attention. Varen had not noticed anything at all. He was still enjoying his own line about the old bad sky. It is a thing I have thought about a great deal since. that the two humans in the room knew something was wrong a full 4 minutes before the Lord Steward of the station did, because we were the only two people aboard whose bodies still bothered to keep track of the temperature. His did not. It had not needed to for 900 years. He had, in the most literal sense, stopped listening to the cold, and so the cold arrived and he did not hear it come. My infirmary panel chimed. Then it chimed again, differently, in a tone I had never heard, a tone I did not know the system could make. I crossed to it. The hearthworks was throwing a fault. Several faults. The heat trim loop that fed the infirmary district had dropped its draw not off, but low, far below its floor, and the automated response, the thing the system was designed to do when a district went cold, was to route more warmth in from the neighboring loops. Except the neighboring loops were reporting the same fault, and the loops beyond those. It spread across the schematic as I watched, a slow gray stain across a diagram that had been uniform gold since the day it was drawn, and every district it touched sent up the same automated request for more warmth from its neighbors, and its neighbors had no more warmth to give, and the requests began to loop, station-wide, a whole habitat politely and desperately asking itself for heat that no longer existed anywhere on the wheel. "Lord Steward," I said, "I need you to listen to me for a moment." Something in my voice reached him where the cold had not. He unfolded from the bench, slow, faintly amused, ready to be gently corrected out of whatever small human panic had seized me. "The hearthworks is dropping," I said. "The whole station's heat loop is faulting out. It's not one district, it's all of them." He looked at the panel. He could read it. The Alin are not stupid, whatever else they are, and I watched him read it. And I watched the moment his face did something I had never seen an Alin face do, which was to arrive at a fact it did not have a comfortable place to put. "That is not possible," he said, "which is what people say. It is always what people say. It is the first thing they reach for when the thing that cannot happen is happening, and it is worth exactly nothing, and I have learned not to argue with it." "How cold does it have to get," I said, "before your system starts shutting down?" "Our systems do not shut down." Varen, I had never used his name without the title, it landed. "How cold before your people can't move?" He told me. It took him a moment because he had to go and find the fact in whatever dusty schoolroom drawer he had left it in 900 years ago, and when he found it his fronds went very still. 10 degrees torpor. Below 0, death. The numbers I already knew. But there is a difference between reading a number in a file and hearing a man say it about himself, in a room where the air is already, measurably, moving cool against the backs of your hands. "How fast is it falling?" Sephi asked. She had come up beside me and was reading the panel over my shoulder with the sharp practical attention of someone who has been in 3 hull breaches and does not intend to make it 4. I ran the numbers. The system, helpfully, would not run them for me. The projection function assumed a functioning hearthworks and returned nothing but errors, because the men who built it could not conceive of wanting to know how fast a station cooled, any more than you would build a house with a gauge that told you how fast it was catching fire. So I did it by hand, roughly, the way you learn to when you cannot trust the instrument, and the rough number was bad. "Couple of hours to 10, I said. "Maybe less near the hull, the coral hold heat longest." 2 hours, Varen repeated. "Before your people start going down, not before it's dangerous now." I turned from the panel. "Where's your crisis authority? Who runs this when it goes wrong?" And there it was, the second face I had never seen an Alin make, because there was no one. There was no crisis authority because there had never been a crisis. There was a steward's council that arbitrated seating disputes at the seasonal galleries and adjudicated matters of precedence and debated, at exquisite length, the proper depth of a bow. There was no one whose job it was to be told the station was dying, because the station had never once considered dying, and a people who have removed every discomfort have, without noticing, removed the entire apparatus by which discomfort is survived. I understood in that moment, standing in a cooling room between an old aristocrat and a freighter pilot, that the 9,000 most comfortable beings in the sector were about to freeze to death inside the finest life support machine ever built, and that the only people aboard who had the faintest idea what to do about it were the two the whole station had spent years quietly pitying for being cold. "All right," I said. "Then it's us. Seffi, I need your hands. Lord Steward, I need your authority, because people are going to need to be told to do things they've never done, and you're the only one they'll listen to. Can you do that?" He drew himself up. To his credit, and I will give the Alling their credit where it is earned, because most of this story is spent taking it away, he drew himself up and he said, "Tell me what must be done." Here is what I knew, standing there, that they did not. I knew that a body which has evolved in weather is a body built for a bad day. Our ancestors did nearly freeze some seasons and nearly cook other seasons, exactly as Varen had mourned, and every one of them who did not die of it passed down to us a body that treats a hard cold not as an ending but as a Tuesday. I can work at 10 degrees. I can work at 0. I do not enjoy it, and my fingers get clumsy, and I make more mistakes, and I hate every minute, but I keep working, because the machine I am running in was built by 4 billion years of Tuesdays that were trying to kill it and mostly failing. The Alling machine had been built by 900 years of nothing trying to kill it at all, and a machine like that, when the bad day finally comes, does not know the bad day is survivable because it has never survived one. It has only ever won, and winning teaches you nothing. The pity ran the other way, is what I am saying. All that time Varen had looked at me shivering slightly in his perfect corridors and mourned the poverty of my design, and the truth was that my shabby, cold-running, weather-beaten body was carrying a capability his beautiful one had traded away 9 centuries before I was born, and neither of us had known it because it had never come up. That is the thing about comfort. It hides the bill. We got to work. The first thing, the only thing that matters in the first hour of anything going wrong, was to stop making it worse. The station's automated response was actively harming it. 9,000 chambers all demanding heat, all failing to get it, all cycling their diffusers full open in the attempt, and dumping what little residual warmth they held into corridors that then vented it toward the hull. The system was, in its blind and beautiful way, spending the station's stored heat as fast as it could in a doomed attempt to reach 26 degrees, which it would never reach again, and would kill everyone trying. "We have to stop it trying," I told Varen. "It's throwing away heat chasing a number it can't hit. We shut the automated response down, seal the outer districts, and pull everyone inward toward the core. Let the outer wheel go cold. Save the middle. Abandon the outer galleries." He said it slowly. Those were the grand ones. I understood later, the seasonal halls, the pleasure tiers, the chambers with the deep prestige. There are families in the outer galleries who have held those chambers for. "They'll hold a grave if they stay," I said. "I'm sorry. There's a warm mass at the core, and it's the only warm mass we're going to have. Everyone has to be inside it. Everything else we let go." I want to tell you he understood immediately. He did not. He argued, for a minute and a half that I could not spare, about precedents, and about which families could reasonably be asked to shelter with which other families. Because even with the temperature falling around his ankles, the ancient machinery of Alling status was still turning over, still trying to sort 9,000 people by rank as it herded them toward survival. And I let him argue for exactly 90 seconds. And then I put my cold human hand flat on his warm chest, which is a thing you are absolutely not permitted to do to an Alling Lord Steward, and I said, "Varen, there is no precedence in a cold room. There's just who's inside and who's outside. Move your people." He looked down at my hand. My fingers were, I have no doubt, noticeably cool against him. The old parcel of bad sky walking around indoors. "Yes," he said, and he moved his people. Seffi took the hearthworks with me while Varen took the concourses. Between the two of us, one freighter engineer and one medic, Neither of us trained on Allen systems, both of us reading manuals we had never expected to open. We found the automated response protocols and we killed them. Not repaired, killed. There was no time to fix 900 years of assumption. There was only time to stop it, to reach into the beautiful dying brain of the station and switch off the reflex that was killing it, the desperate reaching for 26 that it could not stop doing on its own. The moment we cut it, the drop slowed. Not stopped, we had lost the heat source. The trim loop from the fusion core had genuinely faulted, and I had no idea yet why, but slowed. Because the station stopped hemorrhaging its stored warmth into the void, trying to chase a temperature it would never see again. That bought us time, Sephi said, hands braced on the console, breath just faintly visible now in the cooling air of the core. How much? Don't know, more than none. I was already moving to the next thing. There is always a next thing, and the discipline of a bad day is that you do not stand admiring the last thing you fixed, because the cold does not care that you fixed it. The fusion trims the real problem. The loop's not drawing. If we don't get warmth back into the core, we're just freezing slower. The trim loop was 3 decks down, in a service space that the Allen, being who they were, had made as beautiful as everything else and as inaccessible as a shrine. The controls were up in the Hearthworks gallery, gorgeous and useless. They reported the fault but could not clear it, because clearing it required a physical reset at the loop itself, a thing so far outside the imagined life of the station that the procedure existed only as a line in a 900-year-old commissioning document that I found in the end. Because Odell the maintenance human had a copy in the underdeck files, and Odell the maintenance human, it turned out, was the third most useful person on the station that day. I found Odell already down near the loop when I got there, because of course he was. A maintenance man's instinct in a failing station is to go toward the thing that's broken, and he'd felt the cold and gone down before anyone thought to send him. He was a big, quiet man from a heavy-gravity colony, and he was standing at the sealed hatch to the trim loop space, rubbing his jaw and looking at a temperature readout with the expression of a man reading his own obituary. "It's cold in there," he said by way of greeting. "How cold?" "Below freezing. Been venting to the hull since the loop dropped. Resets inside." He tapped the hatch. "Manual valve, then a receipt, then you hold the primer while it catches. 3-4 minutes of work in there." He looked at me. "An Allen goes in there, they're dead before they reach the valve." "Good thing neither of us is an Allen," I said. He almost smiled. "Gonna be a bad 4 minutes." "I've had worse." I had not particularly had worse. But it is the kind of thing you say, and saying it helps, and Odell knew it was the kind of thing you say and did not call me on it, which is its own kind of decency. We rigged what we could. There was no cold weather gear on the Aura lane, naturally. Why would there be, so we made it. Sephi stripped the padded lining out of the infirmary's crash restraints and the freighter's dockside thermal wraps, and Odell knew where the underdeck crews kept the insulation batting for the fusion shielding, and between the 3 of us we assembled 2 ugly bundled suits that would not have passed any safety board in human space and that were, on that day, the 2 most valuable garments in the sector. We did it fast and badly, and it was enough. Enough is the standard on a bad day. You do not get good. You get enough and enough and enough until the day is over. I went in for the first reset because I was the medic and I had read the loop document twice and Odell had read it once. He anchored at the hatch to pull me out if I stopped moving. That was the plan. The plan was, I go in, I work the valve and the receipt and hold the primer, and if I stop responding, Odell hauls me out by the line whether the loop's caught or not, because a dead medic clears no more valves. The trim loop space was a white, cold, beautiful ruin. Frost had bloomed across the grown metal in patterns that would have been lovely if they had not meant that the station was dying. The air was thin and hard, and it grabbed at the inside of my nose the moment I unsealed the hatch. My rigged suit was already inadequate. I felt the cold find the gaps at my wrists and my throat within seconds, a deep aching bite, the old bad sky reaching in to say hello. My hands went clumsy fast. That is the enemy in real cold. Not the pain, the clumsiness, the way your fingers become someone else's fingers, slow and stupid, right when you need them most. I found the valve. It was a manual override, a physical wheel, because the men who built the station had known 900 years ago, in the last generation that still remembered weather, that some things you want a hand to be able to turn when everything smarter has failed. I got both my stupid hands on it and I turned it, and it did not want to turn, and I turned it anyway, because that is the whole of the job in the end, turning the thing that does not want to turn, and my breath came out in hard white bursts, and I counted the seconds off out loud to keep my clumsy mind from wandering off into the warm gray place that deep cold offers you, the place that feels like rest and is death. The receipt next. Then the primer, a lever you hold, physically hold, while the loop decides whether to catch. 10 seconds, the document said. I held it for what my counting told me was 10 seconds, and the loop did not catch. I held it for another 10. Nothing. My hands were failing. I could feel Odell's tension on the line, the coming moment when he would haul me out. Come on, I said to the loop, to the station, to 900 years of comfort that had never once had to fight for its life. Come on. You've done this a million times. You just forgot how. Come on. It caught on the third 10 count. A shudder ran up through the deck, through my knees, a deep mechanical clearing of the throat, and warmth, actual warmth. The first new warmth the station had made in nearly an hour began to move. I felt it before the readout showed it, the way you feel a door open at your back. And then I let go of the primer and I could not make my hands do anything else. And Odell hauled me out, and the warm side of the hatch hit me like a wall. And I sat on the cold, beautiful floor of the Hearthworks approach and shook for a while and let Seffi wrap the infirmary blankets around me, and did not, for once, have anything dry to say. That was one loop. There were 4. I would love to tell you the other 3 were easier. They were the same, is the honest answer, the same cold, the same clumsy hands, the same 3-count wait for the loop to remember its own life. We split them. I took the second, Odell took the third, and by the 4th Seffi had watched us enough times to take it herself, and the 3 of us cycled through that white cold room turning wheels that did not want to turn, one after another, buying the station back its own warmth a loop at a time. And the whole while, the Aling could do nothing. I do not say that with any pleasure. It is simply the fact of the day. 9,000 of them, and not one could go into the cold to save the rest, because their beautiful bodies were built for a world that had never once been cold, and now that the cold had come, their bodies had no answer for it but to slow, and then slow further, and then stop. As the temperature in the concourses fell through 15 degrees, then 12, I watched on the panels and later with my own eyes the finest, oldest, most cultivated people in the sector go quiet. Not panicked. Quiet. Torpor is not a violent thing. They folded down where they stood, the long pale bodies drawing in, the fronds curling, the voices going from water poured slowly to no voice at all, and the great warm halls of the Orelane filled up with the still gold shapes of a people falling gently asleep into their own extinction. And that is where Varen earned back the credit I have been taking from him. Because he did not fold, he was old. And the old go down faster in the cold, and he must have felt it coming for him long before I saw it, but he stayed on his feet through the whole first hour, moving his people inward, herding 9,000 frightened aristocrats toward the warm core with an authority that no seating dispute had ever asked of him, and when they began to go down, he did not stop. He organized the ones still standing to carry the ones who were not. He turned the seasonal gallery, the grandest room on the station, the one whose loss he had argued against with his last minute of comfortable dignity, into a warming hall, packed the fallen bodies close for shared heat, put the young at the center where it was warmest and the old at the edges where it was not. And he took, himself, a place at the very edge, the coldest place in the room, because he was the Lord Steward and it was the last precedence left to him, and it ran the correct way at last. I found him there when the loops were relit, and I finally came up out of the hearthworks, shaking and thawing and looking for the man whose station it was. He was down, torpid, the long gold body folded small against the cold outer wall of his own warming hall, fronds curled tight, the slow architecture beneath his skin barely moving. But he was alive, and he was at the edge, and every ollane between him and the warm center of that room was alive because he had put himself where he was. I got a warming wrap around him, one of Odell's ugly insulation bundles, the finest garment in the sector, and I got two of the standing ollane to help me move him inward, toward the heat that was now, at last, beginning to build again as the relit loops pushed warmth back into the core. And I sat with him while the room came slowly back to life around us, while the temperature crawled up off its floor, while 9,000 people who had gone quiet began, one by one, to unfold. He came back slow. The old always do. His fronds moved first, then his voice, and the first thing the Lord Steward of the Orelane said when he could speak again was not thank you, and was not what happened, but because he was, to the end, entirely himself it was. You are still cold. I laughed. I could not help it. It came out ragged because I was still half frozen myself and running on the far side of 2 hours I do not want to repeat, but it came out. Yeah, I said, I'm still cold. You went into the loop rooms. He said it slowly, working it out, the fact arriving in him and finding for once no comfortable place to sit. You and the other two, you went into the cold that, he stopped. The cold that I could not survive. You went in and you turned the wheels with your hands. Somebody had to. No, a ripple went down him, and it was not the old sympathy, not the gentle mourning I had lived under for 2 years. It was something I had never seen an ollane direct at a human, and it took me a moment to recognize it because I had honestly stopped expecting to. It was respect. Appalled, reluctant, entirely against his will, but respect. Not somebody. There was no somebody. There was only you. Us, all of us, 9,000, and everything we built, every clever thing, every beautiful thing, and not one of us could go into that room and turn a wheel. The station could not. The drones could not. My people could not. I could not. The fronds drew in. And you did it 4 times. I hated every second, I said, because it was true and because I did not want him building me into something I was not. I'm not built for it either, Varen. It's not that I'm strong. It's that I'm built for a bad day and you're not because you got rid of all your bad days. That's all it is. You made a world where nothing bad ever happened, and then nothing bad happened for 900 years, and then something did, and none of you had ever practiced. You practiced, he said, without knowing it, your whole miserable history of weather. Every human who ever nearly froze and didn't, I said. They practiced. I just inherited it. He was quiet for a while, unfolding by degrees, and the warm hall around us filled slowly with the low returning murmur of a people coming back to life. And I sat there in my blankets being cold and being, I will admit, quietly and enormously relieved. I mourned you, Varen said at last. For 2 years. I looked at you cold in my corridors and I thought, there is a creature that has never known comfort and does not even know what she is missing. I pitied you, Medic Halloran. I want you to know that I pitied you sincerely. I know, I said. It's all right. I could tell it was sincere. It was the least accurate thing I have ever believed, he said. And I have believed a great many inaccurate things at great length with great confidence. This one is first among them. We found the fault, eventually. It was nothing dramatic, a fatigue failure in a trim loop coupling that had run without maintenance for 2 centuries, because no one had ever imagined it might need any, a single tired part in a machine that had won so long it had forgotten parts get tired. Odell fabricated a replacement. The station came all the way back up. It took the better part of a day to climb back to 26 degrees, and I do not think there was a single ollane aboard who did not feel every degree of that climb in a way they had never felt the temperature before, because for the first time in 900 years they had been on the other side of it, and they knew now what the number cost. There was, afterward, a great deal of awling ceremony, which I will spare you, because awling ceremony is exquisite and interminable, and I sat through most of it wanting a nap. But there was one thing at the end of it that I have kept. Varin came to the infirmary, his usual bench, his usual slow fold down onto it, some days later, when the station was warm again, and the dead districts reclaimed and the fallen all recovered, no one lost, which is a thing I still hardly believe. He sat, and he mourned nothing, and he looked at me for a while with the new careful look he had worn since the cold. "I have had the commissioning documents read to me," he said, "all of them, the old ones, the ones from the generation that still remembered weather. There is a line in them I had never seen, because no one had read them in 300 years. He paused. "The men who built this station wrote that they had made a place with no bad days in it. And then one of them wrote underneath, in a hand the others apparently disliked, that a place with no bad days would one day have one, and would not know what to do, and had better keep someone aboard who did." "Smart man," I said. "Was outvoted," Varin said. "The line was struck from the final charter. It was thought pessimistic, uncivilized, a blemish on a perfect design." The Franz moved slow. "We kept you aboard for the pay differential, medic Halloran, because we could not bear your presence longer than we had to, and so we paid you to leave quickly. We did not know we were following the oldest and best instruction in our own founding, 3 centuries after we deleted it. We kept aboard someone who knew what to do." "What? You kept aboard someone cold," I said. "Yes," he said. "And then the Lord Steward of the Orelane, who had pitied me sincerely for 2 years, folded his fronds in a way I had never seen and have not seen since, a gesture I later learned the Alane reserve for something they have no other word for, something between an apology and a bow. 'I would be grateful,' he said, 'if you would stay cold among us for a long time yet.' I stayed. The pay's still good. It's still 26 degrees in every corridor every hour forever, and I've stopped noticing it again, the way you stop noticing a hum. But there is a cold gear locker in the Hearthworks approach now, stocked and maintained, that was not there before, and a crisis authority with an actual name at the top of it. And once a season the Alane run a drill they hate, in which the youngest and the ablest of them put on the ugly bundled suits and go, for exactly 4 minutes, into a chamber chilled down near freezing, and turn a wheel that does not want to turn and come out shaking, and are told gently, because they are still Alane and still cannot bear it, that this is what the cold is, and that it can be survived, and that surviving is a thing you have to practice before the day you need it. They're bad at it, they will always be bad at it, but they practice now. And Varin, who is far too old for the suits, watches the drills from the warm side of the hatch every season, and every season, when the young ones come out shaking, he looks at me where I stand beside him in my shirt sleeves, perfectly comfortable in a cold that has them gasping, and he says the same thing. 'You are still cold, medic Halloran.' And I say, 'Yeah.' And he says, 'Good,' and means it, and the two of us stand there a while, warm and cold together, in the finest and least prepared machine ever built, which has, at last, and at some cost, learned to keep one bad weather creature aboard on purpose.